Had you ever felt your tongue crack inside your mouth, so dry it scraped like sandpaper against your teeth? Had you ever heard your own heartbeat thundering in your ears, not from fear, but from thirst? That's where it began. That was the day I learned what true desperation tastes like. The day of the drought. The morning sky was a washed-out gray, the kind that promised no rain, no mercy, only an endless sun waiting to strike the earth like a whip. My hands trembled as I tilted the clay cup at our kitchen table, watching the last half-inch of water shift in the bottom. I lifted it toward the light like treasure. Because that's what it was, treasure. Behind me, a voice cracked through the silence. "Grandma, is that all we have?" My grandson's lips were split. His eyes, those bright eyes that should have been chasing butterflies, not thirst, looked dull, heavy. And I knew the answer before he even asked. "Yes," I whispered. "That's all." What I didn't tell him was that I would give him every drop without hesitation. Love makes those kinds of choices. But even if I gave it to him, it would not last. Not long enough. The well had been dwindling for weeks. At first, the villagers murmured about patience, about the dry season, about how the rains always came eventually. But weeks bled into months, and the well's bottom showed nothing but muck and grit. The thirst was brutal, yes, but worse than that was the suspicion. At night, when the fires burned low, whispers turned sharp, someone's taking more than their share. Someone's hiding water. Someone wants us to die. And always, I felt their eyes slide toward me. The widow. The quiet one. The woman whose son had left long ago. Easy to blame. Easier still to believe I was hoarding what I didn't even have. That night, lying on the straw mat, I stared at the sagging roof while my grandson twitched in restless sleep beside me. The walls seemed to creak from thirst, the air itself dry enough to crack. And then, I heard it. At first, I thought. It was a dream. A faint metallic scrape. The clink of iron against stone. Then, unmistakable, water sloshing. My body stiffened. Someone was at the well. Why? Who would sneak there in the dead of night, when the whole village was too weak to move? Who would dare, unless they were not just drinking? Unless they were stealing? For a moment, I almost stayed in bed. Pretended I had not heard. But then I looked at the child beside me, his lips cracked, his body too small for such hunger. My blood boiled. Whoever was at that well wasn't just stealing water. They were stealing his life. I rose carefully, bare feet silent on the wood. I pulled my shawl tight, though the night was still thick with heat, and slipped outside. The village was hushed, too hushed. The kind of silence that feels like a warning. The moon spilled silver over the dust as I crept toward the well, hugging the shadows. And then I saw him. A figure crouched low, broad-shouldered, moonlight glinting off the metal in his hands. A bucket. But not the communal one left tied to the rope for all. No, this one was polished, private, hidden until now. He lowered it carefully, like someone who had practiced. No splashes, no sound. He had done this before. He had stolen before. And tonight, I was his witness. My throat burned, my fists clenched. Do I call out? Run for the others? Or watch him vanish into the dark, leaving us thirsting? I stepped forward, gravel crunching beneath my foot. He whipped around. For a moment, our eyes locked, his wide with surprise, mine narrow with rage. But then he smirked. Not a guilty grin. Not shame. But arrogance. The kind of smile that says, "You can't stop me. You won't dare." And then he pressed his finger to his lips. A silent command. Stay quiet. Or else. I froze. My breath hitched. Fear rose, sharp and sour, but beneath it, hotter still, was anger. Who was he? Why did he steal? And why did he look at me like I was powerless? I stumbled back and fled into the shadows, back toward my home, heart hammering. My grandson stirred as I slept inside, and I sat in the dark, trembling, listening to the faint splash of stolen water echo from the well. But that night, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just thirsty anymore. I was hungry for answers. By morning, the whispers had multiplied. Did you hear? The well's dry again. There was water yesterday, I swear it. Somebody's bleeding us dry. Somebody wants us dead. I bit my tongue. I wanted to shout, to name the man I saw. But something told me to wait. If I accused without proof, they would laugh. Call me delusional. Call me old and desperate. No. I would need more than words. I would need evidence. That night, I swore I would go back. As the sun sank, the air rippled with heat. My lips split when I smiled at my grandson, forcing hope I didn't feel. Soon, my boy, I lied. Very soon, well, drink. But inside, I hardened. If I had to walk 10 miles, I would. If I had to face a thief alone, I would. This wasn't just thirst anymore. It was survival. It was justice. And whoever thought they could rob me, rob us, would regret it. That night, wrapped in my shawl once again, I crept toward the well. My heart thudded louder than my steps. The clearing came into view. Empty. For a moment, doubt clawed at me. Maybe I was imagining. Maybe the drought had cracked my mind as well as the earth. But then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh, deep, dragging. Heavy. Buckets, barrels, pulled away from the well. Not toward the village. Not toward the needy. But away. Out into the barren land. My blood turned cold. He wasn't stealing to have. He was hoarding. Profiting. And the worst part? He was close enough to know when we slept. Close enough to watch us suffer. I followed the prints a few steps, my body weak, my spirit burning. The night pressed in heavy, thick with silence. And then, from the darkness beyond the path, I heard it. A voice. Low. Gruff. Muttering words I couldn't catch. But one word carried clear. My name. Have you ever leaned over a well, expecting to hear the comforting splash of water, only to be met with silence? Not just silence, but a silence so deep, so hollow, it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. That was what I heard that morning. No echo. No splash. No life. Just emptiness. But the silence wasn't what terrified me. What terrified me was what silence meant. The well, the one thing keeping me all I have, was empty. And if the well was empty, so was my hope. My hand shook as I pulled the rope, each squeak of the pulley groaning like an omen. Half of me prayed the bucket had simply swung wrong, that maybe it had missed the water. But when it clanged against the stone and I dragged it up into daylight, my stomach dropped. Bone dry. Not a drop. I clutched the bucket to my chest, whispering like a fool, no, it can't be. But it was. This well had never failed us, not through storms, not through summer heat. I have my family life. Now, in the cruelest drought I had ever known, it had betrayed me. The question started clawing at my mind. How long had it been empty? Had my neighbors noticed theirs drying up too? How many days of water did I have left? And what would I do when it was gone? I sat on the stone rim of the well, the heat already pressing down, my palms burning against the rough surface. The fields around me mocked me, grass turned to straw, branches limp, the ground cracked open like old bone. Inside, I had 3 jugs of water left. 3. Enough for 2 days, if I rationed like a miser. And then what? The nearest I had was 10 miles away. 10 scorching miles. Alone. That evening, I rechecked the well, hoping, begging, bargaining with whatever gods might still listen. But when I peered down, the bottom was nothing but shadows. That was when I saw it. At first, I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks. But no, etched into the stone wall just a few feet below the surface were marks. Fresh marks. Jagged, desperate lines, carved deep. As if someone, or something, had clawed its way upward. I froze. My breath caught. My heart pounded. Those marks had not been there before. I knew every inch of this well. Someone had been down there. Or worse, something. But if it had climbed, where was it now? That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards became footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like whispers. By morning, I couldn't stand it. I returned with a lantern, its glow spilling into the darkness below. The scratches were clearer this time, gouged deep, angry, human, or almost human. And then, at the very edge of the lantern's light, I saw it. A glimmer. Not water. Not stone. Metal. I lowered the bucket again, not for water but for answers. When it returned, my hands trembled as I reached inside. It was a hinge. Rusted, broken, with a fragment of wood still clinging to it. My blood ran cold. A hinge meant only one thing, a door. For hours, I sat at my table, the hinge lying before me like a cursed relic. Who built a door inside a well? And why hide it? Was it smugglers? Some old hiding place from long ago? Or was it something darker? I remembered my grandmother's stories, men who dug wells not just for water, but for secrets. Places where things best left underground were bound in chains, sealed with iron and warnings. I used to laugh at those tales. Now, laughter was dry in my throat. By the third day without water, I couldn't ignore it any longer. My jugs were nearly gone, my lips cracked, my body weak. If the well held no water, maybe it held answers. I tied a rope around my waist, secured it to the oak tree, and lowered myself down. The stone scraped my palms raw. My breath echoed in the shaft. Above me, the circle of daylight shrank smaller and smaller until it was nothing but a coin of light. At the bottom, my lantern swayed, casting jittery shadows. And then I saw it. The hinge had been just the beginning. An entire door lay across the stones, half buried in mud. Heavy wood, banded, with rusted iron, older than the well itself. And scratched deep into its surface, marks. Furious, desperate claw marks, as though someone had tried to tear it open from below. But that wasn't all. When I brushed away the dirt, I found letters. Carved faintly into the wood, almost smoothed away by time. 3 words. Do not open. My throat went dry. My stomach twisted. Do not open. But someone had tried. Someone had failed. And what if they had succeeded, even for a moment? I stumbled back to the rope, scrambling upward, lantern banging against the stone. When I reached the surface, I collapsed in the grass, the sunlight blinding, my body shaking with terror. The well wasn't empty. It was hiding something. And I wasn't sure water was what I should be searching for anymore. That night, I lay in bed, sleepless, staring at the ceiling. My ears strained at every sound. And then I heard it. Faint. Distant. Yet undeniable. A scraping. Like nails dragged against stone. The sound was coming from the direction of the well. I froze, heart hammering. And for the first time, I wished the well had stayed silent. ____, have you ever started a journey knowing, absolutely knowing, that there's a chance you won't make it back? That every step might be your last? That was the weight pressing on me as I laced up my old shoes that morning. The soles were cracked, the leather stiff, and the road ahead stretched like a sentence carved into the earth. 10 miles. 10 miles to the right. 10 miles under a sun that had already turned the world into a furnace of dust and bone. But what haunted me wasn't the thought of the distance. It was this question, what if I reached the right, and it too had run dry? The morning air was sharp, though I knew it wouldn't last. By noon, the sky would blaze like fire, and I would be nothing more than a shadow crawling across the land. I tied a scarf around my head, slung the last of my water over my shoulder, and looked back, one last time, at the well. Silent. Waiting. The scratches carved into its wall still burned in my mind. The wooden door buried at the bottom. The warning carved into it, "Do not open." The earth wasn't just cruel anymore. It was whispering warnings. But I had no luxury for fear. Fear doesn't quench thirst. Water does. And I needed water. The road stretched ahead, cracked and broken like the skin of an old man. Each step crunched against the brittle ground, sending dust clouds swirling at my ankles. On either side, the fields lay dead. Once green crops had withered into brittle skeletons, and the wind whistled through empty stalks like a mourner's sown. Even the crows were gone. With every mile, my throat dried further, and a water patch at my side grew lighter. I sipped only when my tongue felt like it might split open. Each swallow was measured like gold. But thirst wasn't the loudest thing I carried. No, the silence was louder. Because somewhere behind me, I swore I heard footsteps. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind, or my mind playing tricks after too many sleepless nights. But every so often, the crunch of earth echoed mine, just a half-beat behind. I stopped. Silence. I walked again. Crunch. Crunch. My stomach tightened. I spun around. Nothing. Just the endless shimmer of heat. And yet, the feeling clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Hours passed. The sun clawed its way higher, pressing down with invisible hands. My scarf was soaked, my legs heavy, but I forced them forward. 1 mile. 2. 4. At the 5th mile, I reached the old oak. Or what was left of it. Blackened, dead, its branches like skeletal claws reaching toward the empty sky. Beneath it lay something small. A shoe. Dusty. Torn. Child-sized. My breath caught. Who had walked this road before me? Where had they gone? The silence around me deepened, thick and heavy, pressing into my skull. I didn't linger. I couldn't. By the 7th mile, the world swam in heat. My head pounded, my vision blurred. I staggered off. The road, searching for shade, and found a crumbling stone wall, remains of a farmhouse long dead. I sank against it, clutching the last of my water. That's when I saw them. Tracks. Not footprints. Not animal. Something else. Long, deep furrows dragged across the dirt, cutting straight across the road and disappearing into the dead fields. As though something heavy had been pulled. And they were not old. The earth was freshly torn. My stomach nodded. Whatever had left them wasn't far. I forced myself up, ignoring the scream of my muscles. I had to move. Not rest. Not here. By the 9th mile, I stumbled more than I walked. My tongue was swollen, lips cracked, each breath tearing my throat raw. Then, at last, I saw it. The Rehavar. Or rather, what was left of it. The bank stretched wide and dry, a scar of cracked mud where water had once flowed. Fish bones glittered under the sun, their hollow eyes staring upward. What had once been a lifeline was now a graveyard. I fell to my knees. 10 miles. 10 miles for nothing. Despair clawed at me, but then something caught my eye. A shimmer. Not water. Not light. Movement. I staggered forward, blinking against the glare. My vision cleared, and my stomach turned to ice. Half buried in the mud was a door. Wooden. Rotting. Bound in iron. Its surface carved with the same words I'd seen at the bottom of my well. Do not open. My knees nearly buckled. Another door. One beneath my well. One here in the right bed. 2 doors. What were they keeping shut? And why, deep in my bones, did it feel like they were not shut at all? The sun dipped low, painting the sky in blood-red streaks. I stood above the door, my hand trembling as I brushed dirt from its surface. The air was too still. No wind, no birds. The silence pressed against my eardrums like a scream swallowed whole. And then I heard it. A sound. Faint. From beneath the wood. A knock. Once. Then again. Louder. Steadier. Like a heartbeat. I staggered back, my breath ragged, my eyes locked on the wood as dust curled around me. And then, through the knocking, a voice. Muffled. Broken. But clear enough to freeze my veins solid. Let me out. My water pouch slipped from my grasp, landing in the dirt. I didn't notice. Couldn't. Because the knocking had not stopped. It was growing louder. Harder. And the voice was no longer pleading. It was commanding. Let me out. And in that moment, under the red sky and the empty rehavar, I realized something horrifying. The doors were not built to keep us out. They were built to keep something in. When I first saw him, I thought he was just another wanderer, one more broken soul staggering toward the dried rehavar bed, as desperate as the rest of us. But I was wrong. So very wrong. Because the moment his head turned, and his eyes caught mine across the cracked plain, I felt it. Like ice sliding down my spine. He wasn't lost. He wasn't broken. He was watching. Waiting. And worst of all, he knew something about the door. I crouched low, pressing myself against a jagged piece of rock jutting from the rehavar's empty floor. Heat shimmered in the air, making him look almost ghostly, as though he might vanish if I dared to blink. He moved with purpose, dragging a small cart covered by a torn sheet. Every few feet, he stopped, scanned the horizon, then adjusted the cloth. And then I saw it. The glint of metal. A barrel. Water. Not much, but enough to keep a family all he have. My heart clenched. How was that possible? The rehavar was dead. The well's dry. I had walked 10 miles across dust and silence, and yet here was a man with water. I stepped forward, my throat raw, my voice rasping. Please, I need some. His head whipped around. His eyes narrowed, calculating. He dropped the cart handle and reached beneath his coat. A blade. Not large, but sharp enough to silence me forever. Back, he hissed, his voice jagged and low. Back, old woman, unless you want to end up like the rest. The rest. My steps faltered. My hands lifted, palms open in surrender. I mean no harm, I whispered. I have come from the village. At that, something flickered in his face. Recognition. Or fear. He spat into the dust and jabbed the blade toward me. Then you should have stayed there. Go home. Forget you saw me. Any sane person would have obeyed. I should have turned back, pretended none of it had happened. But something in me refused to let go. Because I'd seen it, the way his eyes kept darting to the ground. To the half-buried door behind him. He wasn't just surviving. He was hiding something. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. What happened to the rest? His jaw tightened. He stepped closer, blade gleaming. They opened it, he said, and none of them walked away. My heart lurched. The well. The carvings. Do not open. Now, 10 miles away, the same warning. The same secret buried beneath the earth. What's under there? I whispered. His eyes darkened. Pray you never find out. The wind rose, carrying dry dust between us. My instinct screamed to run, yet I stayed frozen in place. Please, I tried again, softer now. Just one drink. My family, at that word, something in his expression cracked. His hand trembled, though he still gripped the blade. You think water is your answer, he muttered. But what's coming? Water won't save you. And then, without warning, he turned. He kicked the buried door with his boot, sending a dull echo into the ground. And he whispered, almost too softly to hear, they were already moving. I dared not ask what he meant. People? Creatures? Something else? Instead, I feigned retreat, backing toward the river bank, keeping my gaze low. I let him believe I was leaving. But as soon as his back turned, I slipped behind a tangle of dead reeds and crouched low. What I saw next chilled me more than the hunger, more than the thirst. He uncovered the cart. Beneath the torn sheet were not just barrels of water. There were jars, rows of them, sealed tight, each sloshing with a dark liquid I didn't recognize. He handled them carefully, reverently, like they were not just supplies, but offerings. One by one, he carried them to the hidden door. He placed them down, muttered words I couldn't catch, and shot them through a gap in the wood. My breath caught. Something on the other side pulled them in. The wood shuddered with each jar passed through, a muffled scrape of claws, or hands, dragging them into the dark. And then came a sound. A voice. Faint, distorted, seeping through the cracks. Not the same voice I'd heard before. This one was lower. Hungrier. 3 words. More. Bring more. The man's shoulders hunched. He bowed his head, whispered something I couldn't hear, and dragged his empty cart toward the far trees at the right edge. I stayed hidden until he was gone. My legs shook beneath me, but curiosity burned hotter than fear. What was he doing? Where was he finding water? And why, dear God, why was he feeding it to whatever lay deep behind that door? I climbed out of the reeds, silent as dust, and followed from a distance. The last rays of the sun bled red across the horizon, painting his silhouette like a shadow out of some nightmare. His cart rattled along the broken road, wheels groaning with every bump. He was heading east, toward the foothills, toward, my heart froze, toward my village. I crept closer, careful not to break the silence. His voice carried on the wind, low, muttering, almost chanting. They don't understand. They never will. Keep them thirsty, keep them weak. They will never know the truth, not until it's too late. My stomach twisted. And then, clear as a knife's edge, he spoke my village's name. And after it, my family's. I nearly screamed. My hands flew to my mouth, silencing the cry cawing up my throat. Blood roared in my ears. My heart hammered, threatening to betray me. He knew them. He knew me. This wasn't just a stranger hoarding water. This was someone sent here. Someone who knew exactly who I was. Someone who wanted me. Gone. But why? And worse, what had he already done to my family? Water is life. And he was stealing ours by the barrel. I thought I had already seen everything the drought could strip away, land, crops, even the will to dream. But that night, trailing the stranger's cart beneath the pale glow of the moon, I realized something far worse. The drought had not just dried up rivers. It had dried up people's souls. The man ahead of me wasn't a survivor. He wasn't desperate like the rest of us. No, he was a thief, hauling away the very thing that could have saved us. And worse, he wasn't keeping it for himself. He was delivering it. But to whom? The wheels of his cart shrieked against the broken ground, each squeak cutting through the barren night like a warning. I trailed him at a distance, heart hammering, my breath shallow. The moonlight painted the cracked earth bone white, every shadow threatening to betray me. What if he saw me? What if he turned, blade in hand, and silenced me just as he had promised back at the Rehavar? Still, I couldn't stop. Something gnawed inside me, hungrier than thirst, sharper than fear. I had to know where that water was going. At last, he reached the foothills. A crumbled stone wall jutted from the earth like broken teeth, and beyond it, shadows stirred. People, but not villagers. Their clothes gleamed in the moonlight, finer fabrics, clean hems. Their bodies fuller, unbroken by hunger. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing, and watched. The stranger began unloading his cart. Barrel after barrel clumped onto the ground. The figure stepped forward, lifting them with ease, rolling them into the mouth of a massy half-tent pitched between the rocks. Then I heard it. Laughter. A sound so cruel it burned worse than thirst. Laughter while our children whimpered for water. Laughter while mothers traded scraps of bread for sips of mud. Laughter while fathers stumbled home empty-handed. The tent flaps parted, and a man emerged. A jeweled ring glimmered on his finger, catching the moonlight. He clapped the stranger on the back and handed him a heavy pouch. The clink of metal inside told me all I needed to know. Gold. Water for gold. While we scraped the bottoms of dry wells, while our throats cracked from thirst, they were buying survival. But then I saw the man's face, and my blood froze. I knew him. Not as a friend. Not even as a neighbor. I knew him because my daughter-in-law's family had spoken of him. A wealthy uncle. A man who had sneered at me on my son's wedding day, dismissing me with a flick of his jeweled wrist. And here he was, smug, well-fed, drinking water bought with our suffering. For a moment, my knees buckled. I wanted to collapse into the dirt, to sob until the earth swallowed me whole. What power did I have? One old woman against men with gold, blades, and barrels stacked like towers. But then, I thought of my village, of children pressing empty cups to their lips, of mothers spooning dust into crying mouths, of fathers returning from fruitless hunts with hollow eyes. And most of all, I thought of my son who had turned his back on me, who had chosen his wife's family over his own mother. You will never matter as much as they do, he had once said. And now here they were, his in-laws, his wealthy blood, hoarding the very lifeblood of our people. Rage burned the weakness from my bones. No, I would not collapse. Not tonight. I crept closer, fingers clinging to the broken stones. Through a tear in the tent's fabric, I peered inside. Barrels lined the walls, but there was more. Jars. Just like the ones I had seen at the right bed. Only here, they were not being offered through the door. They were being opened. The wealthy uncle dipped a ladle into one jar and poured a thick, dark liquid into a goblet. He raised it to his lips, and his face twisted, not in disgust, but in delight. Not water. Something else. The stranger stood nearby, silent, his blade loose at his side. Keep. The rehaver sealed, the uncle muttered between sips. They will pay double next month. The others laughed, toasting their goblets. Sealed. That was the word that cut deepest. The well's carvings. The warnings. Do not open. The stranger feeding the darkness with jars of liquid. They were not afraid of what lay beneath the earth. They were using it. Controlling it. And we, the village, we were nothing but their sacrifice. My vision blurred red. My nails dug into my palms until I tasted blood. 10 miles I had walked, my throat a desert, my body trembling, only to find this, men feasting, sipping, laughing while we suffered. Did they believe their secret would stay hidden? That no one would ever dare stand against them? They were wrong. Because if they thought I was powerless, they had forgotten one truth. The thirst of a village is powerful. But the thirst for revenge? That is unstoppable. I knew I couldn't confront them now, not with their guards, their blades, their barrels stacked like walls. But I could take what I had seen. I could bring it back to the village, show them the truth, ignite fury where silence had reigned. But then, a pebble crunched beneath my heel. The sound shattered the night like glass. The stranger's head whipped around. His blade gleamed in the moonlight. Who's there? I ducked low, heart pounding, but it was too late. His eyes swept the shadows, sharp and merciless. And then they found me. Our gazes locked across the rocks. His lips curved, not into anger, not into shock, but into something far worse. A smile. The kind of smile that promised he wouldn't just chase me. He would silence me. For good. Underscore. They thought I was too old, too weak, too desperate to fight back. But they forgot, revenge runs hotter than thirst. The desert does strange things to people. It dries your lips, cracks your skin, and worse, it hollows out your heart until all you hear is the echo of your own hunger, your own rage. I sat by the dry well that had once been my family's lifeline, staring at the dust swirling inside. 10 miles of walking, of aching feet, of parched throat, and for what? To see others have fat on stolen water while my people suffered? No, not anymore. That night, as the moon rose pale and sharp over the sand, I made a promise. They will drink, but they will drink from the poison they poured into my life. I had no army, no weapons, only the frail body of an old woman, bones creaking like dead wood. But revenge doesn't need muscle, it needs patience. It needs cunning. So I began to watch them. The water barons strutted like kings through the village, their barrels guarded, their wells fenced in like temples. But even kings grow careless. They believed no one would dare touch their precious supply. Every dawn, I saw the youngest one carry jugs to the edge of town, trading cups of water for coins. Every night, they stacked their barrels high, leaving them to gleam under starlight. And I thought, what if the barrels were not so pure anymore? I remembered the herbs growing wild near the cracked rocks, plants my grandmother once brewed to treat fevers. But too much of them turned the stomach sour, made the throat burn. Not death. No, worse than death. Sickness. A curse disguised as refreshment. So I gathered them in secret, crushing the leaves between stones until they bled bitter juice. My hand shook, not from fear, but from power. Because at last, I was shaping my revenge, drop by drop. Before I struck, I crossed the old stone bridge outside the village, where the river had once roared but now lay nothing more than a scar of dust. The bridge was cracked, half collapsed, but it stood like a ghost of what once was. And on that bridge, I hesitated. What if they catch me? What if they kill me? The thought gnawed at me like a starving rat. But then I remembered my daughter's lips, split and bleeding from thirst. I remembered the boy who died clutching an empty jug. And I whispered into the silence, better to die giving them pain than leave swallowing dust. From that moment, the bridge was no longer a ruin. It was my crossing, my point of no return. The night I crept to their storehouse, the sky was as black as spilled ink. Every shadow seemed alive, every cricket's chirp a warning. The barrels stood in neat rows, fat and proud. I pried one open, the wood groaning softly, and poured in my bitter concoction. Then another, and another, until I had touched every jug they would sell the next morning. When I left, the storehouse looked the same. Silent. Still. But I knew I had planted a storm. Morning came with heat that clung to the skin like a curse. I sat in the marketplace, pretending to be nothing more than a wrinkled old woman watching the day pass. And then I saw it. One by one, villagers lined up at the baron's stand. They paid their coins, they lifted their cups, they drank deep. And then, a cough. A grimace. A sudden clutch at the stomach. Whispers spread like wildfire. The water is bad, something's wrong. The baron shouted, swore it was impossible, accused the villagers of lying. But the sickness was too quick, too wide. For the first time, the people didn't look up at the barons with fear, they looked at them with suspicion. And oh, how sweet that sight was. By nightfall, chaos ruled the village. Fires burned in cooking pits, but no one feasted. Children cried. Men argued. And the barons, red-faced, sweating, stormed through the streets, demanding answers. That was when I stepped forward, looking for someone to blame. My voice cracked through the silence like dry wood snapping. All eyes turned to me, the bed-backed widow, the one they had mocked, ignored, starved. "What do you know, old woman?" one of them spat. I smiled, though my lips were cracked. "Enough. I know you poisoned this village long before tonight. You took our water, our lihavas, our hope. Did you think we would not notice? Did you think your barrels would never run dry?" The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Some clenched their fists. The barons blustered, but the tide had turned. The sickness, the greed, the lies, it all spilled out in the open. And the villagers, for once, were not afraid. They dragged the barons from their stand, tore down their fences, smashed their barrels open. Water spilled into the dust, soaking the earth dark, and for a moment it looked as if the ground itself was drinking in revenge. By dawn, their empire was ashes. The barons' coins lay scattered, their stores emptied. No one called them kings anymore. They tried to run, but where could they go? Every village knew their names, every road whispered their crimes. And me? I walked through the ruins of their pride, not as prey, but as the one who had set the fire. Later, I returned to my own well. Still dry, still cracked, but I no longer looked at it with despair. Because I had learned something in those long 10 miles I once walked for water. Survival is not just about drinking. It's about refusing to let others drink from your suffering. Yes, the desert was cruel. Yes, the well was empty. But I was not empty anymore. As the sun bled red over the horizon, I whispered to the land, to the ghosts of all who had suffered before me. That day I walked 10 miles for water, but I came back with fire.